Hey, my name's Gia, and I use she, her pronouns, and my presentation today is he uses my body, transgender women's plight for visibility, accessibility, and recognition in South Africa by me. In this paper, I'm going to be looking at how discrimination is rooted in the laws that protect transgender women from discrimination, exploring the perceptions of transgender women, and to evaluate how discrimination shows up in physical violence, the workplace, and religious communities for transgender women in South Africa. In order to do this, we must first understand what does it mean to be transgender in South Africa. So the legal definition of transgender is people whose gender does not match the sex category they were placed into at birth, and who therefore usually opt for medical intervention, hormone therapy, and or gender reassignment surgery to align their body with their gender identity. A survey of LGBT South Africans indicated that 42% of transgender respondents fear discrimination because they are transgender. So something that stands out here is that in order to be transgender in South Africa, it's assumed that medical intervention is wanted, when we know that's not true for all transgender women. It also shows that even though there are supposed to be laws to protect transgender women, almost half of all trans people still fear discrimination in South Africa. So when looking at some of these legal frameworks, the Equal Rights Clause is a clause in the Constitution that protects people on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation. And the passage of the Alteration of Sex Discrimination and Sex Status Act 49 of 2003 allowed transgender women who, 1, they have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and 2, begin to medically transition through the use of hormones, sex reassignment surgery, or other intervention, can legally change their gender markers. However, this sets up a standard that in order to change your gender markers, you have to transition a certain kind of way that not all trans women transition in, because not all trans women have gender dysphoria, and not all trans women want medical intervention, so it sets up the system of who is trans enough in order to get these protections. We also see the Department of Home Affairs would turn away people who had not have sex reassignment / bottom surgery from changing their gender marker, even though the only requirements were to have some form of medical intervention, not necessarily gender reassignment surgery. We also see Anastasia have to go through discriminatory language when trying to get access to changing her gender marker, with someone saying, "It's a shame you're doing this. You're so beautiful as a man." She shouldn't have to hear that when changing her gender marker. She should just be given access and the material she needs to change her gender marker. Also, when looking at the opinions of transgender women by the people of South Africa, almost half the participants reported having seen transgender people before, but not knowing them personally. Nearly 3 in 4 participants agree transgender people should be protected from discrimination. 47.6% of respondents, believe that transgender people are violating traditions of their culture, and slightly more, 51%, agreed that they worry about exposing their children to transgender people. A majority of participants also agreed that they want South Africa to do more to support and protect transgender people. Almost half of participants disagreed that transgender people should be allowed to use the restroom consistent with their gender identity. So what we can see here is there's mixed opinions about transgender people and whether they deserve protection or whether they're violating their cultural traditions. But what this also shows is that when we think about the legal definition of transgender people in South Africa, is if this is how South Africans view transgender people who are going through medical intervention, how do they view transgender people who are not societal conforming, who do not seek medical intervention? And what are their opinions on them, if there are such mixed opinions on people who are operating within the legal definition of transgender? When looking at physical violence, transgender women, especially societal non-conforming transgender women, and transgender women who do not seek medical intervention, are at risk for physical violence. 39% have been verbally have been verbally insulted, 20% have been threatened with harm, 17% have been chased or followed, and nearly 10% have been physically attacked. About half of all black respondents knew people who had been murdered because of their sexual orientation. 85% of transgender women have experienced physical violence in one way or another, and the picture is worse for trans women of color. Passing has been used as a tool by transgender women in order to prevent physical violence. However, passing isn't a true fix, because there is still fear of being outed, and it forces trans women to conform to cisgenderism. So what this shows is there's an epidemic of violence of trans women of color in South Africa, and passing is not a true fix because it takes a toll on trans women. When looking at workplace discrimination, this is a form of discrimination that shows up against transgender women through workplace firings, underemployment, and unemployment. Transgender women are forced to rely on passing or hiding their transgender status in order to gain employment or avoid being fired. Passing can take a mental health toll on transgender women because making one mistake can cause them to lose everything, begging the question of how many transgender women have held leadership positions in major companies, been doctors, or political aides that we will never know about because of them being forced to pass. Workplace discrimination continued. Underemployment of transgender women also takes a major toll on them. When, how, and if they can transition. With cost of hormones being anywhere from R600 to R1000, transgender women are often forced to stretch out hormones, use herbal methods that are less effective, or only take proestrogen tablets to stop testosterone production and not estrogen tablets because prices are more than their monthly salary. Another method used by transgender women to access hormones is asking cisgender women to get birth control pills for them, since they are free for cisgender women and they have the same hormones in them that transgender women get in hormone replacement medication. Overall, workforce discrimination also leads to the invisibility of transgender women in the workforce and their accomplishment in the public and private sector. Faith-based discrimination. While places of faith such as mosques, synagogues, and churches have been places of refuge for some transgender women, there have often been places of discrimination and persecution. Religions that have rigid traditional gender roles do not leave space for societal nonconforming and transgender women who do not seek medical treatment. Transgender women who belong to Christian churches have oftentimes been referred to as drag queens instead of women, being referred to as men and being used as examples or asked to speak on topics such as homosexuality. While religion as a whole might be oppressive to transgender women, individuals who practice religion can still accept transgender women. Transgender women are often secure in their faith, while their religious communities put more focus on man-made constructs such as gender. Really calling to question is the role of religion to follow man's rules or building a spiritual relationship with God. Recognition. Overall, it can be seen that South Africa does not recognize, provide visibility, or accept transgender women. Recognition of transgender women in South Africa and its laws or societal perceptions only recognizes one kind of transgender woman, being a cis-conforming trans woman. At every step of the way, in order to receive rights, protections, the ability of work, to not be attacked, and to be valued in society, transgender women must pass. In this way, the South African government, in its efforts of performative trans inclusion, have created a dysphoric society that forces transgender women to pass as cisgender. This recognition is not a positive one, but one that breeds pain, hurt, and suffering for transgender women in South Africa. Visibility. Visibility for transgender women outside of the conversation of pathologizing them as mentally ill or their connection to HIV/AIDS is virtually non-existent. Transgender women cannot be visible in the workplace or they'll lose their job. Visibility risks bodily harm, and the religious communities won't give them the option because they will shun them. We will never know about the accomplishments of transgender women to South Africa because of their forced erasure. Acceptance. While progress is being made, acceptance cannot happen when people are being killed, forced into poverty, or rejected just for living their truth. True acceptance looks like providing all transgender women protection under the law regardless of wanting medical intervention. True acceptance means the deconstruction of the dysphoric society, ending passing standards and conformity to cisgenderism, and no longer pathologizing transgender women as mentally ill. True acceptance cannot be continuing to turn a blind eye to physical violence, workplace discrimination, and religious persecution of transgender women. In conclusion, what has been illuminated through this presentation is the use of government-enforced anti-discrimination laws does not work in ending discrimination towards transgender women in South Africa. This shows the needs for a grassroots civil rights campaign led by the people of South Africa, advocating to change the societal views and legal protections for transgender women in South Africa. Until such campaign, transgender women will continue to go without recognition, visibility, or acceptance in South Africa. Thank you so much for allowing me to present, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.